I met Valaida over 10 years ago. I at one time served on the African American Philanthropy Committee for the Cleveland Foundation. When she found out about the work that the committee was doing in terms of trying to educate the African American community about giving and donor advised funds and foundation work, was first introduced to the book, Giving Back, that Valaida had done with Charles Thomas, and ultimately found out that the book was turned into this national exhibition. And it was on and popping, as they say, after that.
I too was baptized in the Church of Connie Hill Johnson. That's how I was introduced. Over time, I had built a relationship with Kevin. As our organization, the United Black Fund, we're a grant provider here in Northeast Ohio. And I was trying to identify new opportunities to work with people. And I'd heard of Connie and Kevin through some of my board members, kind of thinking of ways I could pull Kevin into some of the work that we were doing at UBF. And so we went to, I think Ta-Nehisi Coates was speaking at the City Club, and we were a sponsor of that particular event along with the Center for Community Solutions, trying to just bring a dynamic conversation around reparations of all things to Cleveland. And so my wife and I joined together with Connie and Kevin at a wonderful restaurant. And from that point, Connie said, "Hey Cecil, thank you for sharing about UBF, but I gotta tell you something that we're doing here in Cleveland and I need your help." And at that point, I was all in, just because as a organization that cares about the economic stability and the empowerment of the African American community here in Cleveland, after I heard the story of what this exhibition and what the book and its outcome would bring to our city, I had to get on board.
What did you feel was missing? Why did you feel this would be a step forward? What was frustrating you about Cleveland and its Black philanthropic community?
As I said, I currently work and serve in a leadership role for Candid. Prior to that, served as a program officer for 7 years with a local foundation. Even in 2019, about to be 2020, is that it is very common that I will be the only person of color in a room when we're in philanthropic circles, whether we're talking about the institutions themselves, the boards of those institutions, the staff of those institutions, or what is considered to be a philanthropist, i.e. a donor of some nature. That is consistent, and it's also consistently frustrating because that's not the reality that I know when I think about givers and doers and what my experience has been growing up from a little girl to an adult woman. I think the other thing that's missing is just visibility. The headlines, when we're talking about Cleveland, you take your pick. There's always a number of things about what Cleveland isn't, what it's lacking, and then particularly most times than not, Black folks in the Black community are being cast in the light of in need of or lacking. But there was not real visibility about who are the solution builders, who are the warriors out in the community doing the good work, and how they were being resourced or needed to be resourced to continue to do that.
Giving is something you do in private.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yeah.
You guys brought something really special to Cleveland. You unlocked a need that nobody even knew was there. And just think about the power that's going to have now that we're really talking about this.
We could just smile for days.
A couple pop up. One literally small moment happened just yesterday. I was on Twitter, and Evelyn Burnett. I had put out some pictures on Twitter from the young students from Hathaway Brown. And one of the pictures I got of them, they were looking up at Kristen Farmer, Mordecai and Evelyn, and who's on the other side? Chantel. I just caught a picture of the students. Well, Evelyn saw it. But she must have been having a rough day. And she said seeing that picture made her day. She said because it was a rough day. And she ended up putting like humbled, and she said, thanks, the Soul of Philanthropy Cleveland.
What are you hearing from the community and from sponsors? How have they responded?
From the very beginning, when we were starting to approach sponsors for dollars, just this, well, what do you mean Black philanthropy? Philanthropy is philanthropy. And we had learned from our predecessors in Atlanta that when it came time to make the ask, to try to do it across the table. And don't try to fall into the standard of the letter and the, will you give us money? Because it was going to be difficult to communicate in print. What Steve Mentor said that night, that we are not just the recipients and the grantees, but we are also the givers and the donors. So I see us having gone from that, where people still were kind of looking at us like, okay, and then
That's
maybe
the downside of doing something that hasn't been done before.
exactly. So then when they sort of kind of got it, and then to go 3 months later and maybe revisit some of those people or have conversations with some of them who say what Teleange said, thank you. Now we understand. We never thought this was philanthropy. We never looked at philanthropy being an 11-year-old girl making blessing baskets for the homeless. We never looked at it in this way. And yes, we do have individuals who write large checks. Let's not get it twisted. We do have people of wealth in our community. Even before September the 6th, when we were pounding the pavement and sweating bullets and trying to raise money and making the phone calls to where we are now, just the impact on the whole community and how many people, not just African Americans now, are redefining or accepting of our redefinition of what philanthropy is. We were committed to not go the route of the old guard in Cleveland. The names that all of us are Clevelanders, that we traditionally see involved in projects of this scale. We knew this was going to be grassroots and this was going to be civically engaged community activists. We knew we were not tethered to an organization. We were not, there wasn't some big company saying, okay, we've got your back, go do it. We knew this was going to be us. It has been exhausting. We've all said, Lord, get us to December. Just get us to December.
Is it here?
Just get us to December. We'll be okay. But we would not have been able to do it without those 20 or so odd people who each rolled up their sleeves and have been with us since January of 18, when we made that trip to Atlanta, to now.
Okay, so
If I can interject, we also did the same for host committee members and
That's right.
volunteers.
And for
There were also another good 120 that were lined up saying, what can I do? How can I help in different ways?
I wanted to circle back on something that Connie said with respect to the old guard. All right, and that was nothing derogatory, but what actually always tends to happen is that you have a certain group of people who go about a big project or a pseudo big project or a big celebration or a one-off event, and they go about it a certain way, and it's got to be them. And if they're not there, then you have to have their representatives for them to get. There's just a certain process to how this thing has always worked. And as we begin to get to the point where we're exiting the scene, one of the things we wanted to focus on is, look, we have some sharp young people around here. And we cannot always so-called wait and then give them the ball and say, now it's your turn. And I've said this to Teleange a time or three, because she's the youngest person here. She's the oldest millennial you'll ever know. But that's old in terms of wisdom and experience. But they need to move, and they need to move now, not 30 years from now when somebody dies off. They've got to be empowered, experienced, and bring what they bring to the table and take it and run. And one of the things we've done with the Soul of Philanthropy Cleveland is, we've utilized this platform as a way to say, you know what, we can raise significant dollars, but do it in so-called unconventional ways.
I think about the range of who we were touching, because when you think of the arts, you think of upper class folks coming to the museum, and what we recognize, and even choosing the History Center, was the significance of this is the largest repository of African American history in the city. And it also was disconnected a little bit from the African American community. Some of us had not even been in this institution. So when you look at the bridge in which we can help, so this was us helping the History Center reach what we hoped would be an intended audience that it was just kind of missing the mark on over time. but then also providing the exposure for communities or parts of our community that felt that they were not welcome, because you're coming in under my watch now. And when we opened the door, certain parts of our programming was free. Okay, this may have been a charge for admission at certain times. When we identified our giving categories in our development committee, and what they said was a philanthropist goes down to $1. Okay, so we have a giving category that goes all the way to $1, and it has a nice range on it so that the person that may feel like they would be embarrassed giving $1 wouldn't feel so bad because they would be seen with a $100 person.
The amount of chatter from a whisper campaign to the grassroots to the social media to formal platforms, with television and radio, but to have that level of consistency and intention around the conversation of the Soul of Philanthropy Cleveland, Blacks in Philanthropy, how we give, time, talent, and treasure, the reality of our giving power. That, to Kevin's point, that's not a moment, that's a movement, and that's something sustainable that we are now able to build off and carry forward into the future. And so when you have something like the Soul of Philanthropy coming into your city, you really don't want to miss that opportunity to tie in that communication string and be intentional to take that time to make sure that everybody is hearing this message.
And because of that, the Soul of Philanthropy will live on in Cleveland long after this exhibition leaves.
It's a brand.
It's a brand now.
It's a brand.
It's a brand now.
It's a brand.
So,